Yeah, we have a generic recoil system. Pretty sure it can hook into any weapon, conceivably. It's all just using fairly generic standard recoil for now, and that's something we'll just kind of tune as we go forward. So yeah, we have a recoil system.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some thoughts on that would be it's fun, it's cool. We'll just have to make sure that that's the bottom line with this game. It's going to be, does it play really, is it fun? If it's something that gets a little wackier and kind of detracts from the game's fun, then, we're not going to go there. But definitely, I think there's some tuning there we can do that make it feel really great.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
How does the recoil affect the aim currently?
Well, I mean, if you...
it'd
be more about follow-up.
The intensity is to be determined. That's one of those things that Russ is kind of getting at, that sense of balance of fun and gameplay. And I think it's easy for a recoil system to become a little too intense. So we'll be able to tune its impact on aiming, or even just the camera view, pretty well independent.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Composite Armor says, going to be blunt here. Will there be any microtransactions in Mechwarrior? There's none planned at this point. And if that sounds ambiguous, I'm not trying to be. I mean, our plan is to not have any. We're really taking a traditional product and traditional DLC style model with Mechwarrior 5. So that means you buy the game, you get everything that's in it, and there'll be DLC packs. And some of those would be, if depending on, how much rope we have here with the Mechwarrior license, there's going to be, you could think of that as major type DLC packs, like expansion pack type stuff, all the way down to like, maybe there is a pattern pack or something that will add more content into your game, but it's not like, there's not like an in-game store and an in-game currency and all that kind of stuff and taking transactions within the game. It's like, oh, I can go out to Steam or whatever platform you're on, and here there's a be more expansion pack based, and you can choose to buy those or not. And so and that's even kind of post launch, obviously. Like, we are laser focused on shipping the game, so there is almost no time and effort and energy being put into DLC packs. Like, we're just focused on shipping the game. So hopefully that answers that question for you pretty well.
There are two people in GD saying they can't hear us. Is that the case for everybody? Never mind. Moving on.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we can do about that.
Yeah,
Are we thinking that the whole masses can't hear us, or you're just
no? The whole masses are currently telling us that they can hear us. So
yeah.
Okay. So
maybe there's sound settings that they have to look into.
I'm going to jump on the next one, Alex. We'll just try to get through as many of these as we can. How will salvage work? Like HBS's Battletech, where you need multiple parts, more like older Mechwarrior games where if you perfectly cockpit a mech, you get a pristine mech minus a cockpit. Okay, so I'm going to throw out a little bit of a disclaimer here at the moment and say any answers we give in these AMAs, you should expect a possibility of something to change. The game's going to go through alpha and beta testing, and we might change our minds on stuff. But generally, this is how it works. It's not exactly like HBS Battletech, but it's definitely not exactly like you describe at the end there, or it leans more towards as what you call older Mechwarrior games. It's kind of a combination. So the game has negotiation points. That's how we're handling the player's ability to negotiate contracts. And as you earn these negotiation points, you can spend them. And you'll choose, your moments and your times when you want to, pump some of those into your contract negotiation, and that'll allow you to perhaps go for more salvage or, take your flavor of how you'd like to be rewarded, have more say in how you'd like to be rewarded, or perhaps the amount of salvage you can get. And then then it kind of is similar to what HBS's Battletech did in that, let's say you've negotiated, like 10 pieces of salvage, so you will be picking from a larger list. And then, but it's not, I don't believe our plan at the moment is to do this one third thing like Battletech did. It'll be more about if you get 10 pieces of salvage, you can pick 10. And perhaps there are chassis on there that you can pick, like full chassis. But I would say also for balance reasons and pacing reasons and, running a player through an entire career, this is not going to be a system that's like easily gamed, like meaning just cockpit a mech and it's always going to be sitting on the salvage list. No, I would say the chances of the mech chassis being on the salvage list is more of a rare situation, and perhaps that will also be affected by negotiation points, but it won't be a situation where it's like really good players, you're like, this is great, I'm just cockpitting every mech I see, and they're all sitting on the loot table. And we want to make sure that the economy balancing is good, and that means that you can't be able to game something like that. It's going to be more about what your reputation is, what degree of missions you're taking, how much negotiation points you spent, and the chances of maybe a chassis being on there being greater under certain circumstances, and then you can salvage it. So I hope that answers that. But anything you want to add to that, Alex?
No, not really. That covers it, I think.
Well, let's leave this modding question for a future modding AMA, just because I want to be more certain on that. We'll get... we're going to have more themed ones in the future, and I want to make sure we have the proper people answering some of these. I'm not the best person answering the modding support. That'll probably be Brian. Will we be seeing mechs that aren't in MWO yet, such as the Dervish Clint or more of the unseen like the Crusader? No. Pretty much we're taking a portion of... This is one of those big advantageous moments of taking advantage of Mechwarrior Online. And somehow you might say, oh, bummer, I'd like to see new stuff. I'm not going to say no entirely. There could be, a new mech that shows up in there. But in order to get as many mechs in Mechwarrior 5 as possible, we needed to take advantage of what Mechwarrior Online's done. So it's a great advantage for us because unlike past Mercenaries titles that maybe had a dozen chassis, we're going to have like 50 plus, and that's not counting the variants, of course. So there'll be hundreds, including variants. So that answers that one, I think. I'm going to jump back a little bit. I think we just really quickly on language support. We do have full plans to do eFigs, and people are asking about Japanese. I don't know for sure. I guess at this moment, I'll just say we're definitely would love to sim ship with eFigs, and that's all I'll say about that for now. You want to take the Nightbird one there, Alex? Notice that mechs are scaled better than MWO?
Yeah, so as far as I know, this may be better for future art AMA, but mech scaling hasn't been adjusted for this. We may have done some tweaks because of the new per mech, per component damage modeling that we're doing. But we haven't really rescaled anything, to my knowledge. So everything should be what you're familiar with from the MWO scales as they currently.
Yeah, but I don't believe we've scaled anything differently either. I think maybe people are getting a sense of that. Just maybe we've done a better job of scaling the environment in Mechwarrior 5 with the buildings and such, so it feels that way.
Could
be. We can talk a little bit about Mechwarrior 5 difficulty. He's asking about AI shooting accuracy, movement, twist behavior. I'm going to let you answer some of this, Alex, but I'll say that some of this, I think this is an area where things could change a little further. But the notion is, of course, that the game gets harder as reputation level gets a lot higher. I don't know that we've yet decided if the game will actually have difficulty levels beyond that, like if you're going to be able to choose extreme difficulty or beginner difficulty. It's a concept that's a little less common nowadays than it used to be once upon a time. But I guess if we want to talk generally about how the AI gets more accurate, maybe Alex, we just talk a bit about the overall pilot system that affects both your AI pilots and the enemy AI pilots, and how they become more accurate, or deal damage, etc.
Yeah, so we do. I'll kind of lump 2 and 3 into one answer here. So we do have a pilot skill system. We don't have a user accessible skill tree management system. Your own AI pilots will level up naturally according to kind of the situations you put them in, the weapons they're using, the scenarios they run through. So the more they use this, the better they'll be at it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of more of a natural level up system. In terms of the difficulty slider, there won't be a traditional one, at least for now. In terms of other AI, like enemy AI, there are tunables like accuracy, their ability to mitigate or avoid damage, their efficiency with weaponry. So it's pretty comprehensive. And just to touch on that, because it's a blueprint thing, that'll also be exposed to additional modding and expansions and things like that.
All right, cool. Imperious got a few questions here. Imperious, all the models that are in Mech 5. I think you're asking, will we have access to the other models that are not in Mech 5 but are in NWO, like the clan models? I'll leave that for the modding conversation. Colorblind options. How's the paper doll changes going as discussed from MechCon? I think Imperious is referring to some suggestions he made on essentially more of a HOTAS armor counter type details in the paper doll. I don't know about this. Like I think I want to just try to keep one thing in mind. This is not a PvP game. This is not something where we're looking at the most finest details of min-max bouncing. But at the same time, I understand that advanced players like to have more detail than just seeing a deep red on a color, and they'd like to know exactly how much armor's left there. So I don't know that we've made a decision yet on if we're going to add that type of complexity to the paper doll experience. It would have to be an option, obviously. We have to keep in mind that, and this kind of went to the video on the pre-order, like we really need Mechwarrior 5 to reestablish, Mechwarrior out there. It needs to be successful, and that means not dumbing it down to something ridiculous, that appeals to every Fortnite player. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. It still needs to be Mechwarrior, but we also need to be careful with not making it just for the nichest of the fan base as well. So things like this that add maybe more. I think I said HOTAS before, which is right. What's the term I'm looking for? With the paper doll that shows all the armor levels and such. Alex, I was counting
piece of
on
hardware, you mean? What?
No, like on the paper doll when you see all the armor levels for each of your components. There's a term that people use for that, and I've forgotten it right now. At any rate,
HTAL.
Yes, HTAL. That's right. I was thinking not what I said. HTAL. I don't know. Any general thoughts on the paper doll stuff that's being asked? You remember at Mech.
Yeah, so to give some insight into what Imperious is suggesting there for everybody else, that when we got off for the stage demo in the sim pods, I felt my phone buzz, and I opened it, and Imperious had just literally minutes after the sim pod sent me a mock-up that he did, I assume on his phone, of his suggested changes for how to better convey damage states, not relying on color, which was really interesting. On the colorblind option as a whole, so we've considered colorblind and trying to design around that. You can kind of see that reflected a little bit in the original HUD from the original Mechcon playable being green, and the one this year being blue. So blue is a little better to handle across the different colorblind types. So we are keeping it in mind. We haven't yet implemented a system for being able to modify these colors, in the front end. But we'll be considering that for sure.
I'm going to keep moving along here. You had a good run there, Imperious. Actually, so one thing I want to pick out here from this other bit is on slowdown. So, and running into many things. I know there was a lot of comment on the Mechon demo videos, the Mechon trailer, about how the mechs seemed to be carving through the buildings like they were like butter. And yes, the answer is we actually have a full slow field system that we've developed. So essentially every destructibility object has a slow field attached to it, and that slow field can be adjusted for, you know, the size of battle mech that you have, and how much it slows you down and how much it doesn't. And the Mechon demo just really didn't have them present in the building. So we didn't feel like we had enough time to tune them perfectly for the demo. So for us, we thought just carving through these buildings. So I think it was a lot of fun, those that played it. But you know, the Mechwarrior crowd, of course, is a little more discerning. And yes, you will be slowing down when you're plowing through buildings. Maybe the hugest mech going to a very small building might feel next to nothing. But you know, a smaller mech going through that is gonna feel very different compared to the big ones. So yes, on that. It's just try to keep moving here just because there's so many. But let's see. Oops, I lost track. I saw one there on Brexit. Yeah, we're not going to answer about Brexit. That was a good one. I like that question. Medivac, it's funny. Will there be ghost heat penalties? No, I think this should be clear by now, guys, that there's no reason to have ghost heat. There's no reason to have heat penalties. This game only needs to be balanced for fun. You destroying PvE mechs and you know, them shooting at you. So there's no reason for us to even think about ghost heat or ghost penalties.
There was one question about the VR right above the Brexit question. Did you?
Yeah,
there
above
was
the Brexit one.
Sometimes if I skip some, just assume I meant to. No.
Oh.
I think that I don't know. Alex is a big VR guy. He's a big fan. I like it too. The only way I'm going to answer this is just to say, if we have time, like it definitely won't take priority over us just shipping a great game on time. Do I think there's a pretty good chance that at some point Mechwarrior 5 supports virtual reality? I think there's a pretty reasonable chance if the technology continues to move along, and I think if people continue to buy VR headsets and there continues to be an interest, that whether that makes launch, I'm going to say probably less than 50-50, just because we're just so focused on getting the game out. Chance that, you know, within 90 days of release that there's support for it, better than 50-50. You know, that's about the best I can do for you right now. Sorry, that's the best I got. Would we ever see super heavy mechs in MWR Mechwarrior 5? I'm going to go with no. I'm a pretty traditionalist here. I'm not exactly even sure what super heavy means. I think that means over 100 tons. I don't see that day coming anytime soon. Alex? Pickle.
Kind of role-playing elements will there be, and how in-depth will they be for us? It's an interesting question. So probably not role-playing elements in the way you might be thinking. It is the story is a focused, multi-mission campaign. And then in addition to that, there's just the general mercenary life of, fighting and living in the inner sphere. So there will be a concept of, choice in terms of the contracts and the types of contracts you take and the way you approach a situation, whether or not you may choose to side with, side A or side B. And if side A is scrappy, on the edge civilians, and side B is a, less than moral mining company, it's a choice you'll be able to make. And we'll be trying to reflect some of the impact in that in terms of how the company develops and how the player experiences the rest of the world. But Yeah, that's as far as we can commit to that for now, I think.
Clans by end of product life, yes or no? I mean, to me, this all just comes down to product success and lifespan, and it's impossible for me to answer right now. We'll have to see. But if I have it my way, absolutely. I mean, maybe this is, you know, you could start naturally looking at what the first expansion pack might be if, you know, this initial game ends at the year 3049. So, I mean, I really hope so. I think that's, I guess you can take that answer as being, that's what we want to see. And we're just have to get this product out and hope that it justifies, you know, success-wise, that we can continue on, or that we're allowed to continue on. So for now, we just need to ship this game and do the best job we can. And then, you know, the rest will follow. So how much of the Innisphere can they travel, Alex?
I'll think it's pretty much all of it. So we're going to be culling the list a little bit, just so, you know, like 3,000 systems is a bit overwhelming. So we'll cut that down a bit, but, you know, you'll be able to go edge to edge, and there will be some peripheral presences and things like that as well, beyond the Innisphere core. So yeah, a large part of it.
Okay, I'm going to take on this Mech Lab question, and it's a really, really important one for people. What kind of customizability will we have for Mechwarrior 5, Engine, Pharaoh, Endo? I'm not going to take 10 minutes and get into the nitty-gritty, because it, you know, that's how complex Mech Lab is. But I'll answer it very much like I did at MechCon. Maybe some of you didn't hear that question. Yes, there's a Mech Lab. Yes, you can modify your mech. It's just not to the level of Mechwarrior Online. I mean, let's be honest, Mechwarrior Online is far and away the most complex mech lab that there's ever been in a Mechwarrior game by a long shot. It's not even close. And you can do everything, you know, from armor to internal structure to engines and swapping the type of, you know, all the upgrades, everything else. It's a lot, and it's great for a PvP game. Mechwarrior 5 is a single player game, and it has one of the most important things we need to do is balance this economy over from the year 3015 all the way to the year 3049. And since we're going to have upwards of 200 to 250 mechs and mech variants on the marketplace, and you go on missions, and it's in salvage, and you're exploring the extremities of the Innisphere and bumping into chassis in Lao space that you haven't seen in 20 years of career. Those are awesome moments that our game can deliver that no past Mechwarrior game can. So the last thing we also want is that you can say, well, I got a Centurion, I can essentially go into Mech Lab and make all the other ones, you know, through the Mech Lab, or anything that negates other variants and things. You can see we're not going to be doing in our Mech Lab. One good example is, you know, a certain year comes along in the 30s, and, you know, the Jenner JR7F with, you know, Fire Fibers becomes available. That's got to be a thing. You know, we don't want it to be that you took your regular Jenner and just put Ferro Fibers on it. So I hope that answers your questions. You can certainly go in there and adjust armor values. You can go in there and you can decide that, well, I don't ever use this small laser in my head. I'm going to take that off, and I'm going to put some more ammo on, or put some more armor on. Or there's a fair amount that you can do, but it is limited in the sense that we're not making it so you can create totally different, you know, variants and things that we want to save that for more of you know, the marketplace, the salvage, the, you know, this huge long career, and making sure that exploration and discovery and you know, being able to find these variants on the marketplace is going to be, you know, great moments and wow moments, and it's all about economy balancing.
I can just tack one thing to the end of that as well. So you'll get a lot of variety from weapon variants and equipment variants. So we're going to keep working through just what those variants look like in the end of things in terms of values and behavior. But, you know, we're not just at this point considering, well, we'll just change this value from this to this, and suddenly that's a different variant. Some of these weapon classes, we're looking at thinking outside the box a little bit, how they can behave a little differently. So you may find a rare, you know, AC5 from a specific manufacturer with specific values and a slightly different behavior from a standard AC5. So there's going to be a lot of equipment-based variety. provided through the Mech Lab.
Gracias. Silver Guardians talking about fields that took on damage got burned but wasn't permanent. Is there a chance that permanent field damage will go beyond buildings? I think yes. In fact, the fields were actually permanent damage. We had a system that actually all the crops were burnt and gone permanently. Some of the team didn't think the art looked quite good enough for the Metcon demo, so we reverted that out. I think it was just decal, but I think the answer is yes, that first question for sure. And I don't think we've decided upon whether mechs will go critical or not. I think we're still open to it. We certainly would not make everything go critical, but I think that's something that we're going to put on the list as definitely something that we want to explore if we have time. It could be really fun and interesting, of course, if even rarely one was about to blow. But just make a note, Alex. It's cool. There's a couple questions here that talk about, I'm going to lump these next two together really and answer the aspect about infantry. I think the answer here is yes. We have the vehicles and everything, and we'd love to see infantry. We'd love to see the ability, like, just to be having small soldiers on the ground that you can stomp or put your flamers on, and even just have to at least care enough that they might have a single missile launcher or something. The challenge here for us, I believe, is going to come down to performance and making sure that we have enough performance, to spare to kind of do this. Sure, there's a capacity issue, and just making sure that from a priority standpoint, there's a lot of things that are much higher priority to make sure that the game is great before we do this. But assuming we have the time, then it just comes down to priority, because in Unreal, this is just any game, but like we need to find a way or come up with a way to do this in a very cost-effective way from a performance standpoint. Because if you just put a regular character down on the ground to do that, in a lot of ways it might be not as expensive as a mech, because mechs are very complex, but it's a character with all the underlying support that a character has with animation systems and stuff. So we would need a much cheaper way of doing that. And we've come up with a few ideas of very, very, very basic, cheap type infantry in the ground that we don't want to be spending milliseconds of our game time on infantry. We're gonna have to come up with a much more effective way of doing that. So for now, I'm saying we have plenty of people in the office saying we'd love to have that. So any other thoughts on that?
Nope, not really.
Yeah, I know it's been something that a lot of people have been talking about since the trailers and stuff. So I can't guarantee it, but we want it like you. How many mechs can be going available in the closed beta? Let's wait till we get a little closer for that, but there really won't be any reason for us to limit the number of mechs is my basic answer. So I think probably like a lot, maybe all of them. So no promises. It's too early to answer that question on DLC. I think he's asking for. Remember, the only time this will really become an issue is playing in co-op. And then he's also asking about how do we introduce mechs into the game or vehicles. Well, I mean, post-release, again, it's a little early to say, but some will come to official DLC packs that may cost money. Yeah, but there's every chance, of course, that some stuff will just be patched in as free DLC. So we're still a number of months away for us to be able to answer those questions that well. Steam Workshop support for modding, yes. Leave that for the modding AMA, but yeah. How will Mechwarrior 5 interface with MWO, Alex?
It will not.
That's correct. It will not. These are two completely different games. They use completely different engines. CryEngine, Unreal. One's a dedicated PvP multiplayer game with an advanced, like client-server infrastructure. The other is a single-player game with some peer-to-peer support for PvP, at least on initial release. So there's really no interaction between the two. other than they share a great community. And if you pre-order Mechwarrior 5, you get all sorts of great content to take over to NWO, and really we're covering all the bases here. You're going to have a great PvP game to play, and you're going to have a great single-player game to play, and you're going to have some co-op aspect to play as well. So that's how we see it at the moment. And the future, who knows what the future holds for Mechwarrior 5? Obviously, it's going to be an incredible base that we can build off of. Should things be successful and we get to do that.
So,
I don't know anything about track IR. So
I would say the track IR support is the same kind of qualifications we did for the VR questions. So remains to be seen. We want to, but can't commit just yet.
And I think there's
joystick. But
no, sorry, go ahead.
Joystick yaw sensitivity, yes.
I was going to say that there is quite a few things that will fall into a category of, yes, we're going to do that, but it might fall into post-release support. Initial priorities is to ship the core game as high a quality as we possibly can. But, within that first 90 release, post-release, there could be a number of, quality of lifestyle improvements and additions and things like that. And so some stuff are going to fall into that category. That's a good question. Will we be able to determine the protagonist's gender or gender identity? I'm going to just loosely answer that for now and saying some of that's still up for grabs. I mean, the initial thinking was that the answer was no. Like, you have a name and you just kind of... But, I think ultimately the player himself does have a story. Like, you do have a backstory. You have parents, and there's this whole sense of history that will be explained, and you've seen some of that in the trailer and some of that in the demo. And so in some ways we're continuing to talk about this, but there's almost no reason not to just define the gender and name and everything completely, because there isn't like a character building process like you are the character. So there's really no reason or controversy around like just saying this is who you are, because we don't have to do some kind of like character building system anyhow. So I don't know. We're going to keep talking about that here, but this isn't really a thing in our game like it is in some. It's you have a name, you have parents, you have a backstory, you are who you are. Why don't you jump to LNVNR? That's a good question, and I think I know the answer, but it's a test for you to see.
What? Where? Which one are you seeing? I'm not seeing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
In-game content. No content. I mean, based on Russ's previous statements about potential DLC and any additional content or expansions, there's obviously a lot of internal discussion, a lot of internal ideas, internal plans. I will say that the story goes further than the core campaign, so we have a lot to draw from. But in terms of what that might be, and no comment at the moment.
Well, I was looking at the back half of that question, which is like survival mode with waves of mechs. So basically, I kind of interpret that to mean something like our instant action manager. So the plan is for the game to have an instant action manager. This is something that I think will be available from the get-go. Part of me kind of wants it to be available when the campaign's been complete or something like that, but those are just little details that we argue about until the end. Probably be available from the get-go, because that might be a main point of playing PvP. Sorry, I just blew it. PvP. Don't take that as a sign as PvP. I meant co-op. So, in a way to play co-op would be, you can jump into each other's campaigns, but one of the better ways might be just getting into this instant action manager, setting up a scenario or mission type, and jumping in there with 3 friends and playing co-op. So this instant action manager is just what you might assume it would be. It's here, let's do this assassination mission type with this type of map and biome and all these various settings, and I'm inviting 2 friends in co-op, and we'll have 1 AI pilot, and you'll set up a scenario and go out there and play that. So as far as there being little extra game modes like waves of mechs and stuff, I would say you would expect it to support the types of missions you saw in the game. Will Mechwarrior stay more of a mech sim type game and stay away from being just a mech shooter? That's really such a personal opinion type thing. Do you find Mechwarrior Online to be just a mech shooter and not a mech sim type game? If you do, you might feel similarly about Mechwarrior 5. I think it is true that Mechwarrior 5 feels a little bit more stompy, just because I think primarily that's because there isn't the extreme level of customizations happening where you're like just jacking your engines up and going to the skill tree and, you know, like changing mechs to be so much different from their base variations. And in Mechwarrior 5, they're much more like stock variants in many ways. You do some modifications to them, but they feel a little more stock in general. And, you know, we do things a little bit differently with how the animation systems work and how the stompiness kind of feels. And then, of course, the destructible buildings and the slow fields in those buildings. And so I think there is a general sense, a little bit more of power being in a large, stompy robot. But I think combat-wise, it's a shooter. I mean, I think it feels. I would suggest it feels pretty much like Mechwarrior Online in that regard. I don't know if Alex you have a little more thoughts on that, but Mechwarrior has always been an action game, and I think, you know, Mechwarrior 5 is as well. Okay.
Recon asks,
say
can the
about
engine of a chassis be modified, or is it fixed, like in Harebrain's Mech Lab? Right now, they are fixed. Right now, you cannot change the engine.
Will there be maps that are not procedurally generated for main story missions?
Maps
Yes.
that are not procedurally generated for more main story missions. Yeah, so we have the ability to have generated maps. We will have the ability to have generated maps that use specific components, and maps that we've generated, basically, or not generated, but built from the ground up. So the mission that everyone played at the last MechCon, that was a story mission that was hand-built using our existing assets. And the assets that we use for that are also used by the generated system. So it's kind of just this one big shared pool of assets that we can use you know, in hand-built maps or just in generated. So, yeah.
I'm going to jump down to Insaniac 99. I feel like we answered the other ones. Yeah, I think another thing we should bring up or remind people of, and when we've been talking about Mech Lab and everything, is that there is an element here that is new. You know, like you saw some of that in Harebrain's game, and you've seen, you know, obviously aspects of this in Mechwarrior Online. I mean, essentially it's quirks, right? I mean, if you look at, you know, Harebrain's Battletech, they have essentially quirked weapons, and so Mechwarrior 5 does have the notion of manufacturers' weapons. So what you can boil it down to quirks based on different manufacturers. So it does add a level of customization to the battle mech, where, you know, you can swap out your medium lasers to a particular manufacturer's type if it, you know, plays with your preferences better. So it does add another level of flavor to the marketplace and to the salvage, of course, and things like that. And believe it or not, most of these you know, most of these things that, you know, have been planned, you know, for years now, like well before, like, you know, Battletech came out or anything, but, you know, just good ideas. You know, minds think alike, and you will see some of those aspects in Mechwarrior 5 as well. So it gives a lot more flavor to your, again, your salvage and your mech lag capabilities.
As for that Lost Deck question, I can neither confirm nor deny.
Major events like War of 3039. I would say, I mean, it's kind of like yes and no here. Like, yes, the map of the Inner Sphere is going to be changing dynamically with the map of the Inner Sphere as it does in lore. You know, so from the 3015 all the way to 3049, you'll see it happen, and definitely those big events are happening, and of course you'll see them in, like, you know, the news feeds and stuff like that. And of course, it'll also play out that if the player is in that vicinity during that time frame, they can end up, you know, fighting in that area of space and fighting for one of the factions involved in that battle. But just want to be clear that, you know, we don't have the time or resources to, of course, create custom story missions for every, like, major battle that happened. Like, that'll play out in the Inner Sphere and where the missions are and who's fighting, and, you know, and how the map changes and all that. But the custom, you know, story missions are around the game's story, like your backstory, and you've got two different arcs as a player that you're going through. I think that hopefully that was clear.
Yeah, and when those kind of big, you know, known lore events do occur, if, you know, the level of participation that the player will have, it's not like you're going to be, you know, Forrest Gump going in there and shaking hands with the president or anything like that. It's, you are a mercenary. You are not a major force. So the contracts you get will be kind of reflective of that. So you won't be a savior or primary actor in these events.
I'm going to jump to how a co-op part work in the game. So it's just probably pretty clear by now, but I mean, some people, you know, weren't at MechCon or maybe didn't listen into the MechCon stream or haven't caught this, but it's going to happen. It's going to work pretty basically. I mean, we're going fairly old school with that. I mean, this is not some sort of you know, large server infrastructure type thing where there's like a matchmaking service or something like that. I want that to be clear. This is like you and your friends list. So invite them into your game, go into their game and join them. And you can join them on their campaign. You can take the place. You can play as one of their AI pilots. So the notion is, if I'm running a game and I got my 3 AI pilots and I'm having a great time, I invite Alex in. Alex is going to play, let's say I assign him to War Dog, you know, one of my, say, play this one, play this guy. And that way, while Alex is playing with me, we're having a great time, I'm still getting my War Dog guy leveled up along with everybody else. He's not being left behind, and he's joined me in my campaign. And then I can go back, I can go join him on his and play co-op with him, or we can maybe just make use of the instant action manager and just set up a scenario and play together. This is one of those things where we could see slight variations and changes in our design as we finalize things, but just think of it essentially as one of you guys is going to play host, and you can invite 3 of your friends to come in and play co-op with you and experience a single player campaign together, or perhaps the instant action manager. I'm just reading a few guys. There's number 2 on Tiggy there. I mean, that one I think is answerable right now. There is a bit of a choice at the start. You can choose your starting location, and you can start in any of the 5 great houses of the Inner Sphere. Like, you can start within their space, and when you choose that, it does determine what your starting mech is and where those initial missions take place. So primarily it's where you are in space and what the starting mech is. So, you know, again, what you'll start with for a mech, but also, you know, what will be in the market around you, who you're fighting because of where you are in space. Will hero mechs make an appearance? We have many thoughts and plans and ideas there. Let's just say it could be really cool. Good question from Viking. If the game is co-op up to 4, will mission difficulty scale per player? Well, there won't be required number of people to complete because the game is designed to always be completed with either AI pilots or co-op pilots. So the game, doesn't really matter to the game if it's co-op or AI. The mission can be completed with either. But you make a good point on mission scaling, or rather, difficulty scaling, because it was clear in our MechCon demo that it's obviously much easier, no matter how good and strong and great your AI logic becomes. Humans are much better, and so 4 players playing together and focusing down targets and stuff is going to be very powerful compared to having your AI teammates. So I think that's a problem that we still need to handle. That's on our list of we have all the capabilities within the pilot profile systems and the AI profile systems. We just need to, and that is something that we're going to have to spend some time on, because we want the challenge there, of course, to be there when you play with your friends. All right, so we're going to go for about another 10 minutes. And again, if we don't get to your questions, there's going to be plenty of these, and we're doing it again at 6. So Alex, just go ahead and grab any that you want here in this vicinity, and we'll get through this.
I'll just run through some of these.
I'm going to answer Army of One there on the third person. A very robust and significant third-person camera for Mechwarrior 5. There's no reason to restrict it like MWO. There's no PvP competitive issues or anything like that. Again, we want this game to be successful, and that means having it sell as many units as we possibly can to show that Mechwarrior is back and it's viable. So, there's no reason not to have a great third-person camera. That hopefully there's a whole generation of players, as you know, that would love that, and we just would try to make it play, as similar and as good as possible from that perspective. So it's still something we haven't tackled yet, but it's my plan to do so. Go ahead, Alex.
Guai here asks, are we going to see mechs in the campaign mode that will use something other than stock loadouts? It would be great seeing a cicada and knowing that it's not instantly fodder. It would be great. No comment just yet. Dr. Smashy, how will time progression work in the campaign since it covers 3015 to 3049? Time marches on. Time is time. Time continues. Time is a significant resource in this game. The mech lab actions, the progression of the contracts, these things take time. And, you'll have to manage how you use the time available to you. Night missions, yes. Do mechs have floodlights like in previous MW titles? Not yet, but we are looking into it.
Ooh, that's awesome. Sorry, that got me excited. Floodlights sounds awesome.
How much work is going into the Merc sim side of things? I mean, I want to say pretty extreme amount of work. I mean, that's the entire front end metagame experience. Really, is running your Merc unit. So I don't know, a lot.
It's just something we haven't shown yet, right, Russ?
Yeah, we haven't really shown the metagame at all yet, and so that's mostly just due to the entire front end experience just in heavy development. And we'll see. If I guess it'd be, more in the spring, we'll start to see more of that stuff.
A couple of these we've answered, different brands of weapons. One thing, will players be able to influence planetary control, flipping from one noble house to another? No. Planets will flip as they flip in lore. This is not